I never expected humans to be so irrational. Of course, I've studied their species for years, memorized their quirks, their emotional outbursts, their strange, and sometimes dangerous, attachments to things that seem so unimportant. But none of my preparation, none of my years of diplomatic service, could have possibly prepared me for this. I am Jarnak of the Gorvax, proud, disciplined, and utterly baffled by what is happening. My claws are trembling on the ship's control panel, the display showing a heat signature rapidly approaching from behind. They're ships. The humans' ships. They're hunting me across the stars, all because I insulted what do they call it? A dog. In my culture, if you dishonor someone, you face them head on. You fight, you talk, or you die. But humans are responding to an insult to their pet with the ferocity of a blood feud. A small, barking beast I barely paid attention to. I didn't even realize what I had said was an insult at the time, but it clearly touched something deep in them, something I hadn't anticipated. The hunt began almost immediately after the diplomatic meeting on the Terran world ended. I remember standing there, watching as the humans in attendance grew silent after my casual remark. Their faces contorted into anger, not just any anger, but a fury that was far too intense for what I'd said. My translator caught a series of muttered words I didn't recognize. Something about not knowing better and disrespecting a man's best friend. But it wasn't until later, when I received the first hostile communication, that I realized I had ignited something larger than myself. Jarnak of the Gorvax, you will answer for your offense. That was the message. Short, simple, and accompanied by a tactical lock-on to my vessel. They weren't kidding. I didn't think twice. I fled. It felt undignified at the time, running from a threat I couldn't even fully comprehend. Now, with human ships hot on my tail, I know it was the right decision. Gorvax may be warriors, but we're not reckless. Honor means knowing when to fight and when to survive. And this was survival. I pilot my craft through the asteroid field ahead, hoping the debris will slow them down. My ship rattles as chunks of rock slam into its shields. I grit my teeth. The humans are still following, cutting through the field with precision. They're not giving up. What is it about these creatures, these dogs? It was just a creature, a barely sentient thing that followed its owner around. Humans treat them like family. I didn't understand it at first. I don't think any of the Gorvax did. But now I realize this wasn't just a mistake in cultural understanding. It was far worse. I had insulted something sacred to them. And humans, when something they hold dear is threatened, they don't stop. I didn't know that then. I certainly do now. The comms beep, startling me from my thoughts. I hesitate for a moment, then reach out to answer. The voice on the other end is sharp, brimming with anger. It's a human. Jarnak, we've tracked you across 3 sectors. Your only option now is to surrender and face judgment. The venom in the voice is unmistakable. I would laugh if I wasn't fearing for my life. Judgment for what? I bark into the communicator. An insult. You would hunt me to the ends of the galaxy for calling a creature what it is, a beast. There's silence for a moment. Then, the human responds, quieter, more controlled, but no less dangerous. You didn't just insult a dog. You insulted a part of us. We aren't letting this go. The line goes dead. I curse, slamming my fist onto the panel. This is madness. Gorvax warriors have fought for centuries over territories, honor, and survival. But this? I am being pursued by an entire species over an animal. The control panel alerts me to a critical proximity warning, shaking me from my thoughts. I veer the ship sharply to avoid a collision with an asteroid, the ship's shields flaring from the impact. I barely manage to keep the vessel from spinning out of control, my heart racing in my chest. I can't outrun them for long. I need a plan, fast. Desperation forces my mind to race through every possibility. I can't fight them, not directly. Their ships outnumber mine 5-1, and even if I could hold them off, more will come. That's the thing with humans. Once they set their minds on something, they don't stop, ever. But there's one advantage I still have. My knowledge of human nature, or at least, What little I understand. Humans are driven by their emotions. I may not fully comprehend them, but I can manipulate them. That's my only option now. There's one human I know, one who might be desperate enough to help me. It was a mistake, dealing with him. Back on the fringes of Terran space, I had made contact with a disgraced human mercenary by the name of Xander Holt. He had his own grudges against humanity, though I never fully understood why. But now, I think I might. If I can reach him, perhaps he'll help me in exchange for some leverage against his own people. I pull up his last known location in the galactic database. The coordinates flash on the screen. He's deep in human-controlled space, but I have no choice. I lock in the jump coordinates. My ship hums as it prepares for the warp. I glance at the rear-view monitor. The human ships are still close, still gaining. I mutter a silent prayer to the Gorvak's ancestors as the warp drive engages. The stars stretch into blinding lines of light, and just like that, I'm gone. For now. But I know it's only a matter of time before they find me again. And when they do, I need to be ready. I exit warp space in the far reaches of an uninhabited system. It's desolate, the perfect place to regroup. My ship systems take a moment to stabilize, but I don't have time to rest. I access the encrypted communication channel and send a message to Holt. The message is brief. I need your help. Urgent. I stare at the console, waiting for a response. My ship's sensors sweep the area, ensuring I wasn't followed. The calm after the adrenaline rush of the chase is unsettling. It gives me time to reflect, time to wonder how things spiraled out of control so quickly. How did I, Jarnak of the Gorvaks, find myself running from a species that I once viewed as impulsive and chaotic? How did a simple insult turn into a galaxy-spanning chase? And more importantly, how far will the humans go before this ends? The comms crackle, pulling me from my thoughts. Holt's voice comes through, gravelly and tired. Jarnak, I hope you've got something real good to offer, because if the humans are after you, you're more trouble than you're worth. I lean back in my seat, eyes narrowing. I've got more than you think, Holt. But first, I need to know, are you in? There's a long pause, then his voice crackles through again. You better believe it, Jarnak. I'm in. As the line goes dead, I can't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Holt is dangerous, unpredictable. But right now, he's my only chance at surviving this madness. And as I prepare to meet him, one thought lingers in the back of my mind. Never touch a human's dog. Xander Holt is a man who lives on the fringes of society, both literally and figuratively. His name had come up during my early visits to human space whispers about a former military commander turned mercenary, disgraced and exiled after an incident that few were willing to discuss openly. Those who spoke his name did so with a mixture of fear and respect, and it wasn't long before I understood why. As I pilot my ship through the outer edges of the system, I begin to wonder if reaching out to Holt was a mistake. I may have just traded one death sentence for another. But right now, I'm out of options, and if there's one thing I know about Holt, it's that he despises his own people as much as they despise him. That makes him useful. His hideout comes into view on the ship's display, a derelict outpost clinging to the edge of a planet's atmosphere, barely functioning but cloaked well enough to avoid detection by most scans. Holt always had a knack for staying hidden, and I suppose that's what has kept him alive all this time. I bring my ship in close, scanning the area one last time to ensure I haven't been followed. The sensors read clear, but I know the humans are still out there, hunting, waiting. I'm on borrowed time. The docking process is rough. Holt's outpost isn't exactly a standard refueling station. I'm tossed around in my seat as the magnetic clamps engage with a loud screech. It's as if the structure is protesting my arrival, which doesn't inspire much confidence. Once I'm secure, I release the airlock and step into the docking bay. The first thing that hits me is the smell. It's stale, metallic, and faintly reminiscent of burned fuel. The lighting is dim, casting long shadows across the cold, rusted metal walls. It's a far cry from the pristine ships and stations I'm used to. But then again, this is Holt's sanctuary, not mine. As I walk through the narrow corridors, I can hear the faint hum of machinery struggling to keep the place running. I follow the sounds until I reach the central chamber, where Xander Holt himself sits at a makeshift command center, his back to me. He doesn't turn when I enter, but I can feel the weight of his presence. His figure is imposing, larger than most humans I've encountered, and his unkempt hair falls past his shoulders. His clothes are worn, patched together from different uniforms and armor, but his posture is one of someone who is still very much in control. "You've got guts, showing up here," he says, his voice low and gravelly. "Especially with half the galaxy gunning for your head." I step closer, keeping my distance but trying to appear unshaken. I didn't have much choice. Holt finally turns, and I can see the sharpness in his eyes. He's sizing me up, calculating whether I'm worth the trouble. "You must have done something real bad to piss off the humans this much. What is it? Steal one of their ships? Kill one of their own?" I hesitate, unsure how to explain the absurdity of my situation without sounding foolish. "I insulted one of their pets." Holt stares at me, his expression unreadable at first, but then his lips curl into a humorless grin. He leans back in his chair, shaking his head. "A dog? You insulted a dog, and now they're chasing you across the galaxy." "It wasn't intentional," I snap, the frustration boiling over. I didn't know humans valued these creatures so highly, but now they've made it clear. They see it as an attack on their very identity. Holt chuckles darkly. "Oh, I know they do. Humans have a funny way of latching onto the things that seem insignificant to the rest of the galaxy. You insult a dog, you insult them." He leans forward, elbows on his knees. "So, what's your plan? You came to me for a reason." I steady myself, forcing down the rising anxiety. "I need a way to fix this, or at the very least, survive it. I know you have connections, people who could help. In return, I can offer." He holds up a hand, cutting me off. "I don't care what you're offering, Jarnak. I'm not interested in money or alliances. What I want is something a lot more personal." I narrow my eyes, trying to read his intent. "What is it you want, then?" Holt stands, walking slowly toward me. His presence is intimidating, and I instinctively take a step back. "You see, the Gorvaks aren't exactly popular among certain human circles. You've got a reputation for being hard-headed, unyielding, and frankly, a pain in the ass to deal with. But me," he taps his chest, "I've got a score to settle with my people, and helping you gives me the leverage I need." "Leverage?" I echo, unsure of where he's going with this. Holt smirks. "Humans don't forget insults, especially when it comes to their pets. But if I can be the one to hand you over, well, let's just say it puts me back in their good graces, at least for long enough to get what I want." My blood runs cold at his words. "You're planning to betray me?" "Not quite." He crosses his arms, eyeing me with a predatory gleam. "I'm planning to use you as bait. They want you. Fine. But we're going to make sure they work for it. And in the meantime, we'll find a way to turn this whole mess to our advantage." I don't like this. Holt's plan reeks of danger, and I know that trusting him could end in disaster. But I have no other options. The humans are relentless, and without Holt's help, I'll be dead within days. "Fine," I say through gritted teeth. "What's your plan?" Holt's grin widens. "We're going to give the humans what they want, but on our terms." The next few hours are a blur of planning and preparation. Holt's outpost may be run down, but it's well equipped with the tools we need to pull off his plan. He moves with the precision of a seasoned tactician, outlining every detail with a calm that's both unsettling and impressive. "We'll set a trap," Holt explains as he calibrates a device I've never seen before. "They're tracking your ship's signature, so we'll use that to our advantage. We'll lead them to a location of our choosing, somewhere we can control the terrain." "And then what?" I ask, pacing the length of the room. "We fight them off." Holt laughs, a low, dangerous sound. "Not exactly. We're going to use their emotions against them." I stop pacing, my curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" He turns to face me, holding up the device he's been working on. Humans may be relentless, but they're also predictable. They think you've insulted their way of life, so they'll come at you with everything they've got. But if we can hit them where it hurts, make them think they're about to lose something they hold dear. I feel a knot forming in my stomach. You mean, they're dogs? Exactly. Holt sets the device down with a satisfied smirk. We'll fake a signal, make them believe their precious pets are in danger. It'll throw them off their game, make them reckless. The idea is twisted, manipulative, but effective. I nod, though the thought of exploiting their emotions in this way leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. It's the same emotional vulnerability that has put me in this mess to begin with. And now, I'm about to use it to my advantage. But survival comes first. Always. The trap is set within hours. Holt has chosen a desolate moon on the outskirts of human-controlled space, far enough from any major colonies to avoid immediate reinforcements, but close enough that the humans won't hesitate to pursue. My ship's signal has been amplified, and the fake distress signal Holt has created is ready to be transmitted at the first sign of their approach. I stand in the shadow of a craggy rock formation, watching the horizon for any sign of the human ships. My pulse races, the anticipation gnawing at me. Holt is calm, crouched beside me with a pair of binoculars, scanning the sky. They'll be here soon, he mutters. Get ready. I nod, though my claws flex involuntarily, the tension building with every passing second. I've faced countless enemies in my time, warriors, assassins, mercenaries, but this, being hunted by an entire species for a misunderstanding, this is something else entirely. My comms crackle to life, and Holt glances at me. Here they come. In the distance, I spot the first of the human ships, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like blades. My heart pounds in my chest as they close in on our position, their weapons undoubtedly primed. Holt grins. Showtime. He activates the signal, and the trap is sprung. The human ships closed in fast, their sleek silhouettes shimmering against the pale glow of the desolate moon. Holt, still grinning like a predator in the hunt, activated the false distress signal, causing my pulse to quicken. The trap was set, and now we'd see if the humans would take the bait. They're going to pick it up any second now, Holt muttered, watching the console intently. My eyes were glued to the display as the human ships entered range. Holt's signal, carefully crafted to mimic the sound of a distress call from a dog, would soon be detected. The humans wouldn't be able to resist, they'd assume one of their beloved animals was in danger. As expected, a human cruiser suddenly veered off its course, breaking formation and heading straight for us. They've taken it, Holt said, with a predatory smile. I felt a mix of relief and unease. Holt's plan was working, but that meant we were now committed. There was no turning back. If this went wrong, I wouldn't just be hunted, I'd be dead. My claws flexed against the cool surface of the rock I crouched behind, watching the incoming ships. Holt had chosen this spot for its natural defenses, jagged rocks, craters, and caverns that would make it difficult for the humans to engage in a direct assault. It gave us the advantage for now. They're coming in hard, I said, watching as more ships adjusted their course toward the false signal. They're not going to take this lightly. Good, Holt said, as if daring them to throw everything they had at us. That's exactly what we want. I glanced at him. Are you sure this is going to work? These are humans we're dealing with. He shot me a look. You're underestimating how much they'll risk for one of their pets. You'll see. I wanted to believe him, but every instinct I had screamed that this was madness. It had been a mistake insulting that human's dog in the first place, and now I was betting my life on manipulating the emotions of an entire species. The human ships began landing on the moon's surface, and I could see the dust clouds rising as they deployed their troops. They were moving fast, too fast. Holt and I retreated further into the shadows of the jagged cliffs, but I could feel the tension building. If we didn't move carefully, they'd find us before the real plan could unfold. Remember the plan, Holt whispered. We let them spread out, draw them in, and then hit them where it hurts. I nodded, even as my stomach twisted with anxiety. The humans were precise, organized. Even now, I could see them securing positions, spreading out into teams as they began searching for the source of the signal. Then I saw it, something I hadn't expected. Among the human troops, there were actual dogs. Not mechanical decoys or combat drones, but living, breathing dogs. They moved with their handlers, noses to the ground, sniffing out the trail like they had done 1,000 times before. "Those are," I started, but Holt finished for me. "Real dogs," he said, his voice tinged with something like amusement. "They brought them. I told you, Jarnak, humans and their dogs, it's not just a cultural thing, it's personal." I swallowed, feeling my situation becoming more precarious. If they had brought their dogs, it meant they weren't just reacting emotionally, they were prepared for a real fight. And those dogs would be able to sniff us out if we weren't careful. Holt, however, seemed unfazed. He pulled out a small device from his pack and handed it to me. It was about the size of my palm, metallic, and had several blinking lights. "What is this?" I asked, studying it. "A little insurance," Holt said. "Those dogs may be able to track us, but this device will throw off their senses. It creates an artificial scent trail, one that leads them in the wrong direction." I nodded, impressed despite myself. "You've thought of everything." Holt chuckled. "I've been doing this a long time, Jarnak. Trust me, these humans won't know what hit them." As the human troops spread out further, Holt activated the device, and I watched as the dogs suddenly became confused, their noses twitching in different directions. Their handlers barked orders, but the dogs were no longer able to focus, their senses scrambled by Holt's interference. It gave us the time we needed. "Let's move," Holt whispered, and we began making our way through the rocky terrain, staying low and out of sight. The plan was simple: keep moving, stay hidden, and let the humans fall into the trap. Holt had rigged several locations with explosives, and if the humans got too close, we'd trigger them, causing enough chaos to make our escape. But as we moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The humans weren't behaving like they had in the past. They weren't rushing blindly into the trap like Holt had predicted. They were methodical, careful, almost as if they knew something we didn't. "Why are they moving so slow?" I asked, glancing at Holt. He frowned, scanning the horizon. "I don't know. They're up to something." Suddenly, I heard a sharp sound, a distant whine that grew louder with each passing second. I recognized it immediately, a drone. The humans had deployed aerial reconnaissance, and it was heading straight for us. "Holt," I hissed. "They've got drones in the air." He cursed under his breath. "They must have figured out the fake distress signal. They're scanning for us." Panic surged in my chest. "What do we do now?" Holt's expression hardened. "We stick to the plan. Follow me." We broke into a sprint, darting between the rocks and cliffs as the whine of the drone grew louder. I could hear the sound of human troops closing in as well, their footsteps echoing across the barren landscape. My heart pounded in my chest, the fear of being caught driving me forward. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the ground beneath us. One of Holt's traps had been triggered, sending debris and dust flying into the air. I stumbled but managed to stay on my feet, adrenaline surging through my veins. "They've hit the first mine," Holt said with grim satisfaction. "That'll slow them down." But it didn't slow them down enough. The drone was still overhead, its camera scanning the terrain for any sign of movement. We were running out of time. "There," Holt shouted, pointing to a narrow crevice between two cliffs. "We'll hide there until the drone passes." We sprinted toward the crevice, the sound of the drone growing deafening. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder, my body screaming in protest. Just as we reached the narrow opening, the drone's spotlight swept across the ground, illuminating the path we had just crossed. We pressed ourselves against the cold rock, barely daring to breathe as the drone hovered above. The light passed over us, missing our hiding spot by mere inches. I could hear the whirring of its engines, the mechanical sound filling my ears. Holt motioned for me to stay still, his hand raised in a silent command. I obeyed, my heart racing as the drone lingered overhead, scanning the area. It felt like an eternity before it finally moved on, its spotlight disappearing into the distance. "We need to get out of here," Holt whispered once the drone was out of earshot. "They're closing in fast." I nodded, my pulse still racing. "Where to now?" "There's a cave system not far from here," he said. "We can lose them in there, but we need to move now." We bolted from the crevice, racing across the rocky terrain toward the cave entrance. Behind us, I could hear the sounds of explosions as more of Holt's traps were triggered. But the humans were relentless. They weren't falling back, they were pushing forward, determined to catch us. By the time we reached the cave, my legs were trembling from exhaustion. We stumbled inside, the darkness swallowing us as we moved deeper into the tunnel. Holt pulled out a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom as we navigated the narrow passages. "How much further?" I asked, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Not far," Holt replied, his voice steady despite the situation. "Once we're deeper in, they won't be able to follow." But as we moved deeper into the cave, a new sound reached my ears, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Barking. They've found the real trail," Holt muttered. "We need to keep moving." We pressed on, the sound of the dogs growing louder, closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that, despite everything, the humans weren't going to stop. Not until they had me. And the dogs wouldn't be fooled by another trick. The barking echoed through the cave like an omen, each sharp yelp bouncing off the walls and cutting through the oppressive silence. Holt pushed ahead, his light barely illuminating the uneven ground beneath our feet. My breathing was ragged, the fear gnawing at my resolve. Despite the devices Holt had used to throw off the dogs, their relentless pursuit had us cornered. "We can't outrun them," I panted, stumbling over a jagged rock. Holt turned, his face a grim mask. "We don't need to. We just need to reach the chamber." "The chamber?" I shot him a confused glance. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer, instead picking up the pace, leading us deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. The barking was growing louder, more urgent. The humans were closing in, and with their dogs leading the way, we didn't have much time left. My mind raced as I followed Holt, thoughts of how it had come to this swirling in my head. How could such a small, seemingly insignificant mistake, an offhand insult about a human's dog, turn into a life-and-death chase? The humans were obsessed, far beyond anything I had imagined. Their loyalty to these creatures bordered on fanaticism. But why? What was it about their pets that drove them to such extremes? We turned a sharp corner, and suddenly the tunnel opened up into a massive chamber. The air felt colder here, stale and oppressive. The chamber was vast, its ceiling disappearing into the darkness above. Stalactites hung ominously from the ceiling, and the ground was littered with jagged stones. It looked like a place untouched for centuries. "We're here," Holt said, his voice echoing faintly in the cavernous space. I stopped beside him, my chest heaving from the exertion. "What is this place?" Holt's eyes gleamed in the faint light. "This is where we make our stand." I stared at him, incredulous. "Stand? Against what? They have dogs, drones, and a whole army out there. We'll be torn apart." He smiled grimly. "You underestimate how much they've underestimated us." Before I could argue further, Holt knelt down and began fiddling with something in his pack. I watched as he carefully removed several small, disc-shaped devices, placing them strategically around the chamber. "What are those?" I asked, the tension in my voice rising. "Mines," Holt replied. "Not the kind that explode, though. These are sonic disruptors. They'll emit a frequency that'll drive the dogs insane and scramble the humans' communications." I felt a small flicker of hope at that. Maybe we did have a chance after all. But that hope was quickly extinguished when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, methodical footsteps, echoing down the tunnel behind us. "They're here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Holt nodded, standing up and moving to the far end of the chamber. "Get ready." I crouched behind a large rock, my heart pounding in my chest as the footsteps drew closer. I could hear the dogs now, their low growls mixing with the humans' quiet murmurs as they prepared to breach the chamber. Suddenly, a blinding light flooded the entrance to the chamber, and I had to shield my eyes. The humans had arrived. Their silhouettes were barely visible against the blinding glow of their lamps, but I could make out the forms of their soldiers moving into position. And at the front, the dogs straining against their leashes, eager to charge forward. For a moment, there was silence, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Then, a voice calm, authoritative rang out from the entrance. "Jarnak of the Rekir," the human called. "You're surrounded. Surrender now, and we'll take you into custody peacefully. Continue to resist, and we'll have no choice but to use force." I froze, my mind racing. How did they know my name? How did they know it was me? Holt glanced at me, his eyes hard. "Don't listen to them. They're trying to rattle you." But I was rattled. This was no ordinary squad of soldiers. They knew exactly who I was, and they had come prepared. My thoughts flashed back to that moment in the market, when I had foolishly insulted the human's dog. Was that what had triggered all of this? Was it possible that a single human, enraged by a minor insult, had gone to such lengths to track me down? Holt's voice cut through my panic. "Remember the plan, Jarnak. We let them come in, and when they're in range, I'll activate the disruptors. The dogs will go berserk, and we'll have a window to escape." I nodded, though my hands were trembling. I could hear the humans moving closer, their footsteps echoing ominously in the chamber. The dogs' growls grew louder, more agitated. "Last chance," the human voice called again. "Surrender now, or we will engage." Holt gave me a sharp look. "Stay low." And then chaos erupted. Holt triggered the disruptors, and the effect was immediate. The dogs began howling, their frantic yelps echoing through the chamber. The humans shouted in confusion as their communication devices crackled with interference. The chamber filled with the disorienting sounds of barking, shouting, and static. "Now!" Holt yelled, and we bolted from our hiding spots, sprinting toward the far end of the chamber. The humans were caught off guard, struggling to contain their frenzied dogs as the sonic disruptors did their work. But we didn't get far. Just as we reached the far side of the chamber, a flash of light illuminated the entrance. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a new figure, one that sent a chill down my spine. Unlike the other soldiers, this human wasn't wearing standard combat gear. Instead, they were clad in some kind of specialized suit, sleek and imposing, with a visor that glowed ominously in the dark. "What is that?" I gasped, skidding to a halt. Holt's face went pale. "That's not good." The figure raised its arm, and I saw a beam of light shoot from its wrist, scanning the chamber with precision. It passed over the sonic disruptors, and within seconds, the devices short-circuited, their lights flickering out one by one. The dogs immediately calmed, and the humans regained control. They were closing in fast. "Go!" Holt shouted, shoving me forward. "We need to get out of here." But before we could move, the figure in the suit spoke, their voice amplified by some kind of internal comm system. "You've gone far enough, Jarnak," they said, their voice cold and emotionless. "Surrender now, and you may still have a chance to live." I froze, the words sending a wave of dread through me. There was something terrifyingly final about the way they spoke, as if they already knew the outcome of this chase, as if they had anticipated every move we would make. Holt grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a narrow passageway at the side of the chamber. "We can't fight that thing. Move!" I stumbled after him, my mind reeling. Who was that human? How had they found us so quickly, and why were they so focused on me? We raced down the passage, the sounds of pursuit close behind. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they would give out at any moment, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not with death so close at my heels. As we emerged from the tunnel into another open space, Holt skidded to a halt, looking around frantically. "There," he shouted, pointing to a narrow fissure in the rock wall. "We can hide there." We squeezed through the fissure, pressing ourselves against the cold stone as we tried to catch our breath. The barking had started up again, closer this time. The humans were relentless. They weren't going to stop until they had me. I glanced at Holt, my chest tight with fear. What do we do now? We're trapped. Holt's eyes were dark, his face set in grim determination. We don't have many options left. My mind was spinning. Was this really the end? Had I pushed the humans too far? But before I could dwell on the thought, a new sound reached my ears, a low rumble, deep and distant, but unmistakable. I felt it before I understood what it was, the ground beneath us vibrating slightly. Holt's eyes widened, and for the first time since we'd started this insane escape, I saw real fear in his expression. "They've activated the seismic charges," he whispered. My heart stopped. Seismic charges. The humans weren't just trying to capture us, they were going to collapse the entire cave system. The ground shook violently beneath us, a low rumble that escalated into a deafening roar. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling, the fissure we were hiding in barely shielding us from the chaos. Holt's eyes darted around, the panic evident in his expression. "We need to get out of here," he shouted over the cacophony. "Are you insane?" I yelled back, my voice barely piercing through the noise. "They're trying to bury us alive." He shook his head, a fierce determination igniting in his gaze. "If they're detonating seismic charges, they must be planning to collapse this entire cave system. We can't stay here." I wanted to argue, to remind him that our escape had been a hair's breadth away from disaster. But the ground convulsed again, and I realized he was right. We couldn't afford to stay in the open any longer. With a reluctant nod, I followed Holt as he squeezed out of the fissure and into the larger chamber. The rumbling intensified, making it difficult to keep my balance. Just ahead, I could see the humans gathering their forces, some still trying to corral the dogs that had been so disoriented moments before. Panic swept through them, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they'd be too distracted to notice us. "Where to now?" I gasped as we moved away from the chaos, my eyes scanning for a possible exit. "There should be an emergency tunnel," Holt said, his voice tense. "But we need to reach it before they regroup." Before I could reply, the ceiling above us trembled ominously, a shower of dirt cascading down. The humans were beginning to regroup, their panic replaced by a coordinated effort to seal off the tunnels. Time was not on our side. "Over there," I pointed to a narrow passage on the opposite side of the chamber, barely visible through the dust and shadows. Holt led the way, his urgency palpable as we dodged falling debris. I could hear the humans shouting commands, their frantic voices rising above the rumble of the cave. Behind us, the sound of barking dogs echoed, mixing with the human voices in a terrifying cacophony. Just as we reached the passage, I turned to see a human soldier, one of the ones who had been in pursuit earlier, spot us. He raised his weapon, his eyes wide with fury. "Stop!" he shouted, and I felt my heart drop. Holt reacted instantly, shoving me forward into the passage and firing his weapon at the soldier. The shot ricocheted off the walls, but the distraction gave us just enough time to slip into the narrow tunnel. We stumbled forward, the air growing thick and stale as we pressed deeper into the darkness. The sounds of chaos faded behind us, replaced by the low rumble of the cave's instability. But the further we went, the more I felt the weight of the situation closing in. "We can't just run," I gasped, my lungs burning. "They'll hunt us down. We have to find a way to stop this." Holt stopped, turning to face me. "And how do you propose we do that? You insulted one of their own. You think they're going to listen to reason?" I bit back a retort, remembering the human soldier's expression, the anger, the determination. "We need to find a way to communicate with them. If we don't, this will escalate into something far worse than we can imagine." Holt's expression softened slightly, but the worry was still etched on his face. "You're talking about diplomacy with a species that sees you as a threat." "I know," I replied, desperation creeping into my voice. "But I didn't come here to start a war. I came here to learn about them, to find out why they're so different from us. I need to at least try." With a reluctant nod, Holt agreed. Fine. But how do you plan to do that? I thought for a moment, searching for a solution. There's got to be a central command somewhere. If we can get there, we can make them understand that we're not their enemies. Holt raised an eyebrow, skepticism painted across his features. And how do we get there without being shot on sight? Leave that to me. I straightened, summoning whatever courage I could muster. You just need to keep me safe. He gave me a nod, though I could see he wasn't fully convinced. We pressed onward through the darkness, the low rumble of the cave providing a grim backdrop to our desperate escape. After what felt like hours, we emerged into another chamber, this one larger and more lit. My eyes widened as I took in the sight before me, a makeshift command center, filled with humans rushing about, barking orders and checking devices. They hadn't noticed us yet, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. There, I pointed to a raised platform at the far end, where a group of high-ranking humans were gathered, their expressions grim as they surveyed the chaos unfolding outside. That's where we need to go. How do we get past all of them? Holt whispered. We'll have to blend in, I replied, already searching for anything that could help us. If we act like we belong here, maybe we can reach them without drawing attention. Holt's gaze darted around the chamber, and then he nodded. Let's find some gear. We crept along the edges of the chamber, avoiding direct eye contact with the humans. I felt a surge of adrenaline as we searched through the scattered equipment, hoping to find something useful. Finally, I spotted a discarded helmet on a nearby table. Here, I whispered, grabbing it and handing it to Holt. Put this on. He quickly donned the helmet, and I followed suit with a smaller helmet I found. The devices were bulky, meant for human heads, but they would have to do. We stepped back into the fray, moving purposefully toward the platform. I tried to mimic the human gait, my heart racing as I drew closer to the center of command. The humans around us continued their frantic preparations, oblivious to our presence. As we reached the platform, I caught snippets of their conversation, tension crackling in the air. We can't let them escape, one human shouted, slamming a fist against the table. If they reach the surface, they'll rally their forces, and it'll be a full-scale war. Another replied, their voice low and steady. We need to consider the implications of killing an ambassador. If this escalates, we risk everything we've built. I exchanged a quick glance with Holt. The situation was far worse than I had anticipated. I had hoped to find a way to negotiate peace, but it seemed like the humans were already preparing for a fight. We have to get closer, I murmured to Holt. I need to talk to them. Before I could react, a human soldier turned toward us, suspicion written across his face. Hey, you two, what are you doing here? Holt stepped in front of me, raising his hands defensively. We're with the reconnaissance team. We just got back from the southern tunnels. The soldier's gaze narrowed. Where's your clearance? Panic surged through me, but I kept my expression steady. We were just... A shout echoed from the opposite side of the chamber, drawing everyone's attention. They're moving into the northern tunnel. We need to secure the perimeter. In the moment of distraction, Holt seized the opportunity. This way, he urged, pulling me toward the platform just as the soldier hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do next. We climbed onto the platform, and I could see the higher-ranking humans now, their faces illuminated by the glow of monitors displaying maps of the cave system. Sir, one of them shouted, noticing our presence. We have intruders. Stop them, the leader bellowed, but I felt a surge of determination rise within me. I couldn't let this be the end. Wait, I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. I'm not your enemy. The humans froze, their attention shifting toward me, a mixture of shock and confusion crossing their faces. Holt stood beside me, the weight of our deception hanging heavily in the air. I'm Jarnak of the Rekir, I announced, my heart pounding in my chest. I came to learn, not to fight. We're being pursued for an insult, not for any real crime. An insult? The leader replied, skepticism heavy in his tone. You expect us to believe that? Yes, I insisted, stepping forward. The human I offended, he was just protecting his dog. I didn't mean any harm. Please, we need to talk before this escalates into war. The humans exchanged wary glances, and for a moment, I thought I could see the doubt flicker in their eyes. But before anything more could happen, the ground shook again, this time more violently, throwing us off balance. Get ready, the leader yelled. They're collapsing the tunnels. We need to act now. Panic surged through me, and I realized that time was running out. If I didn't find a way to get through to them now, we'd all be doomed, caught in a conflict that could spiral out of control. The chamber shuddered violently, dust raining from the ceiling like tiny meteors, each drop reminding me that we were standing on a precipice. The humans were scrambling, the gravity of the situation pressing down on us all. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, an unspoken threat hovering like a dark cloud. We need to make a decision now, the leader shouted, his voice a sharp crack in the chaos. If we don't take control, we risk losing everything we've worked for. I took a breath, forcing myself to be calm despite the clamor of uncertainty swirling around us. You have to understand, I'm here to stop the war, not to instigate it. We can't afford to fight. The human's eyes narrowed. You think you can just waltz in here and demand peace? Your kind has been nothing but a menace since you landed on our world. My heart sank. The leader's contempt echoed the sentiments of many. The tension in the room was palpable, and the soldiers surrounding us were bristling with aggression, their weapons primed and ready for a fight. We're not your enemy, Holt interjected, stepping closer to me, his posture tense. We came here for peace, not for war. If you destroy us, you won't just kill us, you'll set off a chain reaction that could destroy everything you care about. The leader paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He opened his mouth, but just then, a massive explosion rocked the chamber, sending debris cascading from the walls. The soldiers yelled, scrambling for cover as alarms blared, drowning out our voices. Fall back, the leader barked, urgency lacing his words. Seal the exits. Wait, I shouted, but the chaos had already consumed the room. Soldiers rushed past us, their focus now entirely on the encroaching threat outside. The floor shook beneath us, making it hard to stand. We were running out of time. If I didn't act now, the conflict would spiral into an all-out war before I could convince them of my intentions. Over here, Holt shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the far side of the platform, where the commotion was less intense. I could see a large window overlooking the vast cavern beyond. Through the thick dust and debris, I caught glimpses of chaos outside. The humans were fighting against unseen adversaries, their weapons discharging flashes of light into the murky darkness. What's happening? I yelled, but Holt was already moving, focused on the task at hand. We need to get out of here. This place is a death trap, he replied, leading me toward a staircase that spiraled down into the darkness. Where does this go? I asked, fear creeping into my voice. An emergency exit, Holt said, urgency making his tone sharp. It should take us to the surface. I nodded, though my mind raced with anxiety about leaving the humans behind. They still didn't trust me, and the thought of abandoning them felt wrong. But as another explosion echoed through the cavern, the decision was made for us. We descended the staircase, the rumble of chaos fading as we moved deeper underground. I could hear the frantic shouts of the humans above, the sounds of gunfire and the barking of dogs merging into an overwhelming symphony of panic. The corridor twisted and turned, and my heart sank as I realized how far we were going. What if they catch us? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. They won't, Holt insisted, but his voice lacked the conviction I needed to hear. We just need to reach the surface and find a way to communicate with them. I'll figure out a plan to get us back. We emerged into a large cavern, the air cooler and fresher than in the tunnels. A massive entrance loomed ahead, the light of the surface spilling into the darkness. But the moment we stepped out, my heart dropped. The chaos outside was overwhelming. Humans were fighting against creatures other Rikiri. I squinted, trying to make sense of the scene. The other aliens had taken advantage of the humans' distraction, and now it was utter bedlam. "What's happening?" I exclaimed, my voice rising in horror as I took in the sight of my own kind clashing with the humans. Holt's face paled. "We're being attacked. This isn't good." I felt my chest constrict as the reality of the situation sank in. The Rikiri were fighting for dominance, taking advantage of the confusion created by my blunder and the ensuing chaos. In their eyes, I had insulted the humans, and now they sought revenge. "No, we have to stop this," I shouted, rushing forward. But Holt grabbed my arm, his grip firm. "Wait, you can't just run in there, they'll kill you." "Then I'll die trying," I shouted back, pulling away. My people were here, fighting, and I had to reach them before it spiraled out of control. I dashed into the fray, the sounds of battle engulfing me. Rikiri warriors clashed with the human soldiers, the air thick with the smell of sweat and the acrid scent of burning materials. I fought to reach my brethren, but chaos surrounded me, humans firing weapons and Rikiri using their claws and teeth to defend their territory. "Jarnak," I heard a familiar voice shout over the din. It was Kren, one of the Rikiri leaders I had known from the academy. "What are you doing? Get back." "I'm trying to stop this," I yelled back, fighting my way through the melee. "This isn't what we want. We can't do this." But Kren's eyes were wild with anger, and he swung his weapon toward me, barely missing my head. "You've betrayed us. You insulted the humans. They'll pay for your mistake." "No, you don't understand," I shouted, desperation flooding my voice. "I didn't mean to. It was a misunderstanding." He stepped forward, rage boiling in his eyes. "A misunderstanding? We're at war now because of you. You're one of them." "I'm one of you," I screamed, feeling a surge of frustration. "We can't let this escalate. We need to unite, not fight each other." But Kren was already turning away, focusing on the humans again. "We'll teach them the price of disrespect." The chaos intensified around me, and I felt a sinking dread as the realization set in. This was not just a skirmish, it was becoming a full-scale conflict, one that could lead to devastation on both sides. Holt burst through the fray, his face pale with fear. "Jarnak, we have to get back to the command center." "But there's no time," he shouted, grabbing my arm. "We need to regroup. If we can't convince them, this could escalate beyond anything we can handle." With a reluctant nod, I followed Holt back through the chaos, dodging weapons and narrowly avoiding strikes. The air was filled with cries of pain, anger, and desperation, and my heart sank further with each step. We fought our way back toward the command center, but the damage was done. The humans were already mobilizing their forces, and the Rikiri were charging forward, refusing to back down. As we reached the entrance to the command center, I turned to Holt, determination surging within me. "We have to make them listen. If we don't stop this now, we're going to lose everything." "I know," he replied, his voice resolute. "But how do we do that?" Before I could answer, a loud explosion rocked the ground, and we stumbled back. Dust and debris filled the air, and I could see flames beginning to lick the walls of the command center. "This is getting worse," Holt yelled. "We have to move." As the chaos swirled around us, I could feel the weight of the impending conflict settling in. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about our very survival. "We need to get to the communication room," I said, urgency lacing my words. "If we can reach the central console, we can broadcast a message to both sides. We have to unite against this." "Let's go," Holt shouted, and we plunged into the chaos once more, determined to find a way to stop the war before it was too late. As we sprinted through the chaos, my thoughts swirled like the dust clouding the air around us. I couldn't shake the feeling that this conflict was about more than just a single insult. It was a confluence of grievances, misunderstandings, and a deeper, darker scheme that had been brewing long before I ever stepped foot on this planet. In the midst of my panic, memories surfaced, snippets of conversations with Kren and others from the Rikiri Council. I'd only begun to piece together the larger puzzle just days before I'd made that fatal remark about the dog. I was standing in a dimly lit chamber, surrounded by the flickering holograms of my peers. The council had gathered to discuss a troubling development. An alien race, the Slarvans, had approached us, offering a technological advancement that they claimed would enhance our future. It had been cloaked in the guise of a vaccination, a way to bolster our defenses against potential human threats. "It's a trap," Kren had warned, his voice tense as he slammed his fist on the table. "They've always had ulterior motives. They want to weaken us from within, to create divisions. We can't trust them." "But think of the benefits," another council member, Turin, argued, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "This technology could make us invincible. The humans won't stand a chance." The council was split. Tensions ran high, and I could feel the weight of history pressing down on us. Rikiri had long viewed humans as a threat. We were territorial, driven by an instinct to protect our own at all costs. The Slarvans preyed on that fear, promising security through their so-called advancements. I shook my head as the flashback faded. I should have realized then that these discussions would lead to this moment. The Slarvans had fueled our fears, and now it was coming to fruition. Their machinations had set us on a collision course with humanity, and it was all spiraling out of control. "Jarnak, focus," Holt shouted, pulling me back to the present. His voice broke through the haze of my thoughts, and I realized we were nearly at the communications room. "We have to warn them," I said, urgency creeping back into my voice. "If we can explain the real threat, they'll understand." "But how do we convince them?" Holt replied, glancing nervously at the frantic battle raging just outside. "They see us as the enemy now." As we burst through the door of the communication room, I felt a surge of hope. The console flickered to life, and I quickly punched in the command codes. But as I did, I noticed the emergency warning blaring on the screen: structural integrity failing, external forces overwhelming the defenses. "Jarnak," Holt exclaimed, "we don't have time." "No," I replied, desperation tightening my grip on the controls. "I can't let them fight without knowing the truth. The Slarvans have manipulated us all." The console hummed, and I could feel the energy coursing through it. I focused on the system, trying to access the main communication frequency that would reach both the Rikiri and the humans. I glanced back at Holt. "Cover me. If the humans break in, I need you to distract them." Holt nodded, taking a defensive stance by the door. "I'll do my best, but you have to hurry." I turned back to the console, fingers flying across the controls as I initiated the broadcast. My heart raced as I prepared my message. I had to make them listen, had to make them understand. "Attention, Rikiri and human forces," I began, my voice steady despite the chaos outside. "This is Jarnak of the Rikiri. I stand before you as a witness to a greater threat, one that seeks to tear us apart for their own gain." Suddenly, a group of humans stormed into the room, weapons raised. I felt my stomach drop, but I pressed on, my resolve firm. "The Slarvans have been sowing discord between our races. They have offered us technology disguised as a vaccination, promising safety while only seeking to exploit our weaknesses. We must unite against this common enemy." Holt stepped forward, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Please, listen to him. We can't let them win." The humans hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. I seized the moment, pushing my point further. "Look around you. This chaos serves the Slarvans' purpose. They thrive on our conflict, and if we continue down this path, we will only fulfill their desires. We must cease hostilities and investigate this matter together." The tension hung thick in the air. I could see doubt creeping into the expressions of the humans, the gears of their minds turning. Would they believe me? Would they see reason? But just then, a loud explosion erupted outside the command center, and the walls shuddered violently. Dust and debris rained down, sending everyone stumbling. "Jarnak, we have to go," Holt shouted, urgency etched on his face. I hesitated, unwilling to abandon the message I had just begun. But as the alarms blared and the building shook, I knew we were running out of time. "Let's get out of here," I shouted, turning back to the humans. "We can still fight together." With a reluctant nod, they lowered their weapons, and we bolted from the room. As we sprinted back into the chaos, I couldn't help but feel the weight of our collective fate on my shoulders. The Slarvans were the real enemy, and if we didn't act fast, we would be fighting each other until it was too late. End of flashback. We burst back into the fray, adrenaline surging through my veins. The sounds of conflict surrounded us, and I could feel the desperation of both sides. We had to find a way to unite before it was too late. "Over there," Holt shouted, pointing toward a group of humans fighting back to back against a wave of Rikiri. "We can get their attention." I nodded, pushing my way through the chaos. The humans were clearly outnumbered, but their resolve was palpable. I could see their determination, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "Stop fighting," I shouted as we drew closer, my voice barely carrying over the din of battle. "We need to talk." But the fight raged on, and the humans, caught in the heat of conflict, were unwilling to listen. I turned to Holt, frustration boiling inside me. "We have to make them see reason," I yelled, but he was already moving, pushing through the fray toward the nearest soldier. "Listen, we're not your enemy," Holt shouted, desperation lacing his voice. "There's a bigger threat. The Slarvans are manipulating us." I watched as the human soldier hesitated, confusion etched on his face. "What are you talking about?" he yelled back, still ready to defend himself. I rushed forward, desperation fueling my every move. "Please, you have to trust me. We're on the same side. If we don't stop fighting, the Slarvans will win." The soldier exchanged a glance with his comrades, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. For a heartbeat, it felt like time had frozen, the chaos of the battle fading into the background as they considered my words. But just then, another explosion rocked the ground, and the moment shattered. The soldier turned back, eyes filled with fear and anger. "Get away from me, alien!" As the conflict escalated around us, I felt the cold grip of dread clenching my heart. Would we ever find a way to unite before it was too late? Would the Slarvans' machinations tear us apart forever? We were standing on the brink of an interspecies conflict that could lead to devastation on both sides, and all I could do was hope that I could find a way to save us all from the brink of destruction. It's one thing to run from an angry mob. It's another to flee a galaxy on the brink of war. The chaos in the streets of the human settlement had transformed from a mere riot into a full-blown conflict. As Jarnak, I had thought I understood humans, how their emotions could swing from joy to fury in an instant, but I had underestimated the depth of their feelings, particularly regarding their pets. Each corner we turned revealed more turmoil. The conflict wasn't just between humans and Rikiri. It had escalated into something larger, involving our alien allies as well. I'd seen the Slarvans lurking in the shadows, their smiles hidden behind veils of deception. They had waited patiently for this moment, ready to pounce on our shared weaknesses. "Jarnak, keep moving," Holt urged, glancing back at the growing throng behind us. "We need to find a secure location." I nodded, but my thoughts raced. "Where can we go? They'll be watching every move we make." "We need to get to a communications hub," Holt suggested. "If we can reach a secure line, we might be able to warn the Rikiri Council about the Slarvans' involvement in this." The chaos swirled around us, and I felt the weight of our situation pressing down on me. I had made a grave mistake, and now it was threatening to ignite a war, not just a petty conflict, but a conflagration that could consume entire systems. We dodged through alleys and side streets, the sounds of conflict echoing behind us. It was surreal, almost as if the world was falling apart because of one careless remark about a dog. But it wasn't just about the dog. I understood that now. The Slarvans had exploited that moment, inflaming tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface. "Jarnak, focus," Holt's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "We're almost there." I pushed myself to run faster, the adrenaline coursing through me. The sight of a tall building loomed ahead, its exterior riddled with signs of battle. A communications hub. If we could just get inside, maybe we could turn the tide. We reached the entrance, and I slammed my palm against the door panel. It hissed open, and we rushed inside, locking it behind us. The room was dim, the screens flickering with static. My heart sank as I saw the chaos reflected in the footage from various cameras, the streets filled with humans and Rikiri, all fighting for reasons that now felt tragically convoluted. "We need to get this system online," I said, racing to the nearest console. My fingers danced over the controls, but panic surged when I realized the primary systems were down. "What the—" "Here," Holt shouted, pointing to a backup generator. "We can use that." I scrambled to follow his lead, my heart racing. With every passing second, the urgency mounted. I could feel the weight of the galaxy's fate resting on my shoulders. As Holt worked frantically, I glanced at the screens displaying the conflict outside. I could see humans, armed and desperate, battling against Rikiri who were only following orders. This was no longer just a petty diplomatic incident. It was a cataclysm. "Jarnak," Holt's voice broke through my thoughts. "I've got it online. You need to send a message to the council." I rushed to the console, my heart pounding. The last thing I wanted was to fail again. I pulled up the communication channels and prayed for a connection. As the static cleared, I prepared to transmit our plea for peace, determined to expose the Slarvan's manipulations. "This is Jarnak of the Rikiri Council," I spoke into the mic, my voice steady despite the chaos outside. "I stand before you to report an urgent crisis. The ongoing conflict is being fueled by Slarvan deceit. They have instigated this war under the guise of offering protection." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost feel the council's disbelief. My throat tightened as I continued. "The humans are not our enemy. We must unite against the real threat before it's too late. They are attacking us not for power or territory, but for the love of their pets. We must understand this." Suddenly, the screen flickered, and a figure appeared, a human officer, his face weary yet determined. "Jarnak, is that you?" he asked, disbelief evident in his tone. "Are you saying the Slarvans orchestrated this?" "Yes," I replied, desperation fueling my words. "If we don't act now, we'll all be pawns in their game. The conflict is about to escalate beyond our control." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding. "If you're lying, Jarnak." "I'm not," I insisted, my voice rising. "We have to come together. We cannot let the Slarvans win." The officer looked at me, weighing his options, and then nodded. "I'll relay this to command, but you need to hold your position and prepare for potential attack. We're still not sure who we can trust." "Trust me," I urged, feeling the tension in my chest. "If we fail, it won't just be your people at risk, it will be all of us." As we finished the transmission, the building shuddered violently, the walls rattling as the conflict outside intensified. Holt and I exchanged a worried glance. "What now?" he asked, breathing heavily. "Now," I replied, determination surging within me, "we prepare for the worst. We may need to fight our way out." "Fight?" Holt raised an eyebrow. "You're not serious. If we're going to stop this war, we must be willing to face the consequences of our actions. We need to protect this place and our message. If they don't believe us, we have to show them." The sounds of combat echoed louder, the energy of the conflict reverberating through the walls. We took up defensive positions near the entrance, hearts racing as we prepared for what lay ahead. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of humans stormed in, weapons drawn. My heart sank. They looked fierce and ready for a fight. "Don't move," one of them shouted, eyes narrowing as they took in our defensive stances. "You're under arrest for starting this mess." "Wait," I shouted, raising my hands in surrender. "You don't understand. We're trying to stop the war." "Yeah, right. You're just another alien trying to take us down," another soldier spat, finger hovering over the trigger. "Stop," Holt shouted, stepping forward. "You have to listen. The Slarvans are the ones pulling the strings. They want us to fight each other." I could see the soldiers hesitating, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. It was a fragile moment, but one that could slip away in an instant. "Your anger is misplaced," I continued, voice steady. "I'm not your enemy. We can't let them win." The soldier lowered his weapon slightly, confusion flickering across his face. "What are you talking about? The dog is a symbol of love," I interrupted. "But this war isn't just about a dog. It's about manipulation, about fear." As I spoke, I could see the gears turning in their minds. For the first time, I sensed a crack in their resolve, a willingness to listen. "We need to come together," I urged. "If you're willing to fight, then fight against the Slarvans. Help me show the Council that they are the true enemy." The atmosphere was electric, and I held my breath, waiting for a response. "Why should we trust you?" the soldier asked, still skeptical but curious. "Because we're all in danger," Holt exclaimed, stepping closer. "If we don't put aside our differences, we'll fall right into the Slarvans' trap." After a tense pause, the soldier lowered his weapon entirely, glancing at his comrades. "Okay, what do we do?" "Let's gather everyone we can," I said, my voice firm. "We have to take the fight to the Slarvans before they can exploit our fear further." With newfound determination, we set to work, bridging the gap between our two species. As we rallied both humans and Rikiri in the communications hub, I could feel a shift in the air. The anger and hatred that had threatened to consume us began to dissipate, replaced by a shared resolve. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew that tension still simmered just beneath the surface. But we had a chance to rewrite our fate and stand together against the real enemy. The atmosphere in the communications hub buzzed with urgency. Holt and I quickly organized a makeshift strategy session, gathering both humans and Rikiri, who had decided to set aside their differences for the time being. It was a fragile alliance, one that needed to be nurtured if we were to stand a chance against the Slarvans. I stood at the front, addressing the mixed crowd. "Thank you all for coming together. I know tensions are high, but we have a common enemy that seeks to exploit our divisions. If we don't act decisively, we risk losing everything." The humans exchanged wary glances. I could see that many were still processing the shift in allegiance, their anger towards me simmering beneath the surface. One soldier, a tall human with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. "And what makes you think we can trust you, Jarnak? You're an alien diplomat who insulted one of our own. Why should we believe you now?" "I understand your skepticism," I replied, meeting his gaze head-on. "But I promise you, I've spent years studying humans. I've witnessed your compassion, your loyalty, and yes, your ferocity when it comes to protecting those you love like your pets. I am not your enemy, and if we work together, we can dismantle the Slarvan deception." There was a tense silence, and I could see the doubt lingering in their eyes. But I pushed on, tapping into what I had learned about human emotions. Imagine your homes burning, your loved ones at risk, all because of a manipulative force that seeks to turn us against one another. If we can defeat the Slarvans together, we'll demonstrate that love and unity prevail over fear and division. Holt chimed in. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about proving that we're stronger together. If the Slarvans see us unite, they'll know they can't just divide and conquer." Slowly, I saw some faces soften, the resolve in the room shifting from suspicion to a cautious willingness to collaborate. The soldier nodded, still wary but intrigued. "All right, I'm listening. What's your plan?" "We need to create a diversion," I said, tapping into the strategic thinking I had honed over years of diplomatic negotiations. "We need to lure the Slarvans into a position where we can catch them off guard. With your technology and our insight into their tactics, we can mount a counterattack." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and the tension began to dissolve. "So what do we do?" asked another human, a tech specialist from one of the nearby research facilities. "We need to gather intel on their movements," I replied, gesturing towards the various screens around us. "We can use the communications array to hack into their channels and uncover their plans. Meanwhile, we'll assemble a strike team to hit their main base and draw attention away from our vulnerable areas." "Sounds risky," the scarred soldier said, crossing his arms. But I'm in. Let's show those Slarvans what happens when they mess with humanity. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe we could turn this around after all. We worked tirelessly, feeding off each other's expertise. The humans brought their technological prowess to the forefront, while I offered insights into Slarvan tactics based on my years of observation. It was a blend of cultures and knowledge, a testament to what we could achieve together. As the hours wore on, we gathered intel about Slarvan movements. Their ships were beginning to converge on our location, drawn by the chaos that had erupted. They believed us to be on the brink of collapse, ripe for the picking. They had no idea what we were planning. With the data compiled, we set our plan into motion. We split into teams, one to carry out the diversion, another to infiltrate the Slarvan base and extract crucial intelligence. I was assigned to the infiltration team. The idea of being on the front lines filled me with a mix of excitement and dread. My past experience had been rooted in diplomacy, not combat, but I couldn't let fear overshadow the duty I owed to both humans and Rikiri. As we prepared for the operation, I looked around at my newfound allies. The scarred soldier stood beside me, now more determined than ever. "You ready, Jarnak?" he asked, adjusting the weapon slung across his shoulder. "Ready as I'll ever be," I replied, steeling my resolve. "Let's show them what we're capable of." The infiltration began under the cover of darkness. We moved stealthily, sticking to the shadows, the distant sounds of conflict echoing in the night. I was acutely aware of the weight of my actions, knowing that this mission could change the tide of our war. As we approached the Slarvan base, my heart raced. I could see the unmistakable silhouettes of their ships looming against the starlit sky, and I felt the enormity of the moment. We had to succeed. Failure was not an option. We reached the perimeter and began to implement our plan. Holt led the charge, his military training evident in the way he coordinated our movements. I followed closely, utilizing my diplomatic knowledge to identify the most effective entry points. "We're in," Holt whispered, peering through a gap in the wall. "Now, we need to locate their command center. That's where we'll find the intel we need." I nodded, scanning the area. The Slarvans were unaware of our presence, their focus directed outward, anticipating an attack from the humans. We had the element of surprise on our side. As we navigated through the corridors, we stumbled upon a room filled with Slarvan officers, their conversations buzzing with strategies to exploit the ongoing conflict. I listened intently, heart racing as I gathered valuable information about their plans. "We'll strike at dawn," one officer said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "The humans will be too busy fighting amongst themselves to notice our advance." My stomach twisted with dread. I couldn't let this happen. "We need to disrupt their plans," I whispered to Holt, who nodded in understanding. "Let's plant some explosives," he suggested, eyes glinting with determination. "If we blow this place, it'll send a message and stall their attack." Together, we set to work, carefully placing the explosives in strategic locations throughout the command center. Every second felt like an eternity, and the tension hung heavy in the air. As we finished, an alarm blared, echoing through the base. "They know we're here," Holt exclaimed, eyes wide with urgency. "We have to get out now." With adrenaline pumping, we retraced our steps, dodging Slarvan guards as we maneuvered through the corridors. The sounds of chaos erupted around us, shouts, blaster fire, and the shrill of alarms reverberating through the air. "Over here," Holt shouted, leading us toward an exit. Just as we neared the door, it swung open, revealing a group of Slarvan soldiers on the other side. "Get down," I shouted, instinctively pushing Holt to the ground as blaster fire erupted. We hit the floor, and I could feel the heat of the blasts zipping overhead. "We need to move," I yelled, scrambling to my feet and diving toward cover. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I could feel panic clawing at my insides. But there was no time for hesitation. We had to make it out alive. This was our chance to turn the tide. "Cover me," Holt shouted, returning fire as I darted toward the exit. The Slarvans were relentless, but we had to keep pushing forward. I reached the door, hitting the release mechanism with a shaky hand. It slid open, and I burst through, the cool night air hitting my face like a breath of fresh hope. We stumbled into the open, breathing hard as the chaos erupted around us. "Where's the extraction point?" I gasped, looking around frantically for our escape. "There," Holt pointed to a nearby transport ship, still concealed in the shadows. "We need to reach it." Together, we sprinted towards the ship, the sounds of blaster fire growing fainter behind us. We climbed aboard, and I hurried to the controls. "Go, go, go!" Holt shouted, eyes darting behind us as I initiated the launch sequence. The ship lifted off, and as we soared into the sky, I glanced back at the base. A massive explosion erupted, illuminating the night as the command center was engulfed in flames. The blast sent shockwaves through the air, and I could see the Slarvans scrambling in confusion below. We had done it. We had struck a blow against the enemy. As we flew away, I felt a rush of exhilaration mingled with fear. We had turned the tide, but the war was far from over. Holt clapped a hand on my shoulder, eyes shining with a mix of triumph and determination. "We did it, Jarnak. We sent a message." In the days that followed the attack on the Slarvan Command Center, the atmosphere was charged with a renewed sense of purpose. Holt and I worked tirelessly alongside our human and Rikiri allies to consolidate our resources, strategizing our next moves. The destruction of the Slarvan base had not only bought us time, but had also sent shockwaves through their ranks, proving that we were not to be underestimated. The command center was a pivotal win, but I knew we had to follow up with decisive actions. Our alliance had sparked a glimmer of hope, but the Slarvans would not take this lying down. They were crafty, ruthless, and driven by their desire to dominate the galaxy. I found myself in a conference room aboard the transport ship we had commandeered, surrounded by a mix of humans and Rikiri. Maps and data displays filled the space, a jumble of information representing our intelligence on Slarvan operations. "Okay, team," Holt said, leaning over the table, his expression serious. "We need to exploit the chaos we've created. The Slarvans are scrambling to regroup after the destruction of their command center, but they won't stay disorganized for long. We have to hit them again while they're vulnerable." I nodded, my heart racing. "I agree. We've managed to disrupt their command structure, but we can't stop there. We need to take out their supply lines and their ability to reinforce their positions. If we can cripple their logistics, it will significantly weaken their offensive capabilities." A human officer spoke up, a strategist named Commander Harris. "We've intercepted communications that suggest they're planning a counteroffensive. We need to identify their supply routes and target them before they can regroup." "Let's set up a series of ambushes," Holt proposed, his eyes gleaming with determination. "We can draw them into specific locations where we have the advantage." As we fleshed out the details, the room buzzed with energy and ideas. For the first time since the conflict had escalated, I felt a sense of unity, a shared vision driving us forward. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. Our alliance had transformed into a coalition of resistance, and we trained relentlessly, blending human combat tactics with Rikiri agility. I threw myself into the training, determined to prove that I could be more than just a diplomat, I could be a warrior. One evening, as we wrapped up a session, Holt approached me, sweat glistening on his brow. "You've really stepped up, Jarnak. I never expected a diplomat to adapt so quickly to combat training." "Survival demands it," I replied, catching my breath. "I have seen firsthand the cost of underestimating our enemy. The Slarvans may be powerful, but they are not invincible." He nodded, his gaze turning serious. "We've lost too many already. But I believe we can turn this around. If we stay focused and committed, we'll show them that humanity and our allies are a force to be reckoned with." I felt a swell of determination at his words. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that our differences could forge a powerful alliance, one that could stand against the darkness threatening our worlds. Our first ambush was set for a few nights later. We had pinpointed a key Slarvan supply convoy that was vital for their operations. The plan was straightforward: lure them into a narrow canyon where our combined forces could flank them. As we set up the ambush point, my heart raced with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The canyon loomed ahead, the rocky walls echoing with the sounds of our preparations. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, reflecting on how far I had come since that fateful day when I insulted a human's dog. I was no longer just Jarnak, the diplomat. I was part of something bigger, fighting for the survival of both our species. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, and I knew that this mission was a chance to atone for my past mistakes. "Positions," Holt commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. We scattered into our designated spots, my heart pounding in rhythm with the distant rumble of approaching vehicles. The convoy appeared, a line of armored transports rolling into the canyon. As they passed our hidden positions, I felt a rush of adrenaline. "Now!" Holt shouted. The canyon erupted into chaos as we unleashed our ambush. Blaster fire rained down from our hidden posts, and we launched grenades into the ranks of the Slarvan convoy. The surprise was palpable, and for a moment, we had the upper hand. "Push forward," I yelled, sprinting toward the nearest transport, my weapon raised. The Slarvans were disoriented, struggling to regroup. We had to keep the pressure on. As we advanced, I caught sight of a Slarvan commander rallying his troops. He was formidable, barking orders and pushing his soldiers to retaliate. I felt an instinctual urge to confront him. I needed to end this quickly. I broke from the main group, weaving through the chaos, determined to reach the commander. The ground shook with explosions, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of blaster fire. "Jarnak, where are you going?" Holt shouted, but I didn't look back. I was focused on my target. I emerged into an open space where the Slarvan commander stood, his armored form towering over the chaos. He spotted me, and his eyes narrowed with disdain. "An alien fool who thinks he can challenge me." "I'm not here to challenge you," I replied, raising my weapon. "I'm here to stop you." With a fierce cry, I charged at him, dodging incoming fire. The Slarvan commander retaliated, his blaster firing with lethal precision. I felt a searing pain as a shot grazed my arm, but I pressed on, fueled by determination and rage. In a burst of adrenaline, I lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. We wrestled, each of us fighting for dominance. My training and instincts took over as I maneuvered to gain the upper hand. With one swift motion, I managed to disarm him, sending his blaster skittering across the rocky surface. I held him down, panting heavily as I stared into his furious eyes. "You've underestimated us for too long. This ends now." Suddenly, a burst of gunfire erupted around us, and I realized we were not alone. The Slarvans had regrouped, their forces descending upon us. I could see Holt and the others fighting valiantly, but we were outnumbered. "Get up!" I shouted at the commander, dragging him to his feet. "You want to survive? Help us fight back." To my surprise, he nodded, albeit reluctantly. Together, we stood against the onslaught, a strange alliance forged in the heat of battle. As the fight raged on, I felt the tide of battle shifting. We were no longer fighting just for ourselves. We were fighting for survival, for the very essence of what it meant to be sentient in the galaxy. The combined forces of humans, Rikuri, and even the Slarvan commander formed a line against the incoming wave of enemy troops. We fought side by side, exchanging glances of understanding, of unity. With a final push, we turned the tide. The Slarvans, realizing the futility of their attack, began to retreat, their forces scattering in disarray. Cheers erupted around us, and the air was electric with victory. "Did we really just win?" Holt exclaimed, grinning widely as we surveyed the remnants of the battlefield. "Yes," I replied, panting heavily but filled with a sense of exhilaration. "And this is only the beginning." In that moment, I realized the truth. Our alliance had not only survived, it had thrived. We had proven that love, loyalty, and unity could overcome even the greatest of challenges. And in our shared fight, we had redefined what it meant to be allies, forging a bond that would stand against any threat that dared to rise. The stars above Earth shone like a field of diamonds, twinkling against the velvety backdrop of the cosmos. It was beautiful, and I had spent countless nights gazing at them from the observation deck of the human cruiser Endeavour. In the aftermath of the conflict with the Slarvan Empire, the newly forged alliance between humans and Gorvax felt fragile, yet exhilarating. We had faced down a common enemy, and now, as ambassadors of peace, we were tasked with rebuilding. I turned away from the window, focusing on the bustling command center. Holt, my human friend and ally, stood beside me, his eyes scanning the data flowing across the holographic displays. "Jarnak, the latest reports from the border worlds are troubling," he said, his brow furrowed. "Unidentified ships are crossing into human territory." "Unidentified? Are they Slarvan remnants?" I asked, my heart sinking at the possibility. The last thing we needed was another war. Holt shook his head, leaning closer to a display. "No, they're not Slarvan. Our ships are reporting energy signatures unlike anything we've encountered before. It's as if they're altering reality." A chill ran down my spine. The unknown had always been a source of anxiety, and the thought of an alien force that could manipulate the fabric of space was particularly unsettling. "Can we intercept them?" "We've sent out scouts, but they're moving fast. Whatever they are, they seem to be heading toward the human colony on Gorthroman 4. Holt's voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying tension. "Then we need to act quickly," I said, my mind racing. "Prepare a diplomatic envoy. I will not allow this threat to jeopardize our alliance before it has even taken root." Holt nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "You think we can negotiate with them? If they're hostile? Then we'll find out quickly. We cannot assume the worst before we have facts." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the unease swirling in my gut. "Prepare for departure. I'll gather the Gorvax Council." The journey to Gorthroman 4 was tense, the silence in the ship palpable as we awaited the outcome of our diplomatic mission. I stood at the forefront of the command deck, a sense of dread clinging to me like a second skin. The voices of my fellow diplomats buzzed around me, but I barely registered their words. "Jarnak," Holt's voice broke through my thoughts, snapping me back to reality. "We're receiving a distress signal from the colony." "Put it on screen," I commanded, my heart racing as the visuals flickered to life. The image of the colony appeared, showing chaos buildings ablaze, people fleeing, and strange ships hovering ominously above. "A Krell assault! We're under attack! We need assistance!" The panicked voice of a human officer crackled through the static. "Krell," I whispered, the name tasting foreign on my tongue. The Krell were a race long thought extinct, remnants of a violent past that had terrorized both humans and Gorvax centuries ago. It seemed impossible that they had returned. "Jarnak, we need to act now," Holt urged, urgency lacing his tone. "We can't let this turn into a full-scale war." "Agreed," I replied, steeling myself. "Send a transmission to the Gorvax fleet. We must rally our forces and head to Gorthroman 4 immediately." As the orders flew out, I felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on my shoulders. This was no longer just a diplomatic mission. It was the dawn of a new conflict, and I would be at the heart of it. The ship's engines roared to life as we hurtled toward Gorthroman 4. I stood beside Holt at the helm, feeling the raw energy of impending battle surging through me. We both knew what was at stake. Our alliance, the fragile peace we had fought so hard to achieve, hung in the balance. "We need to be careful," Holt warned, his eyes fixed ahead. "The Krell have been known for their ambush tactics." "I understand," I replied, recalling the stories my elders had told me about the Krell's ruthless efficiency. "But we cannot show weakness. We must strike first." Holt nodded, a grim determination settling on his features. "All right, we'll coordinate our attack and—" Suddenly, alarms blared, cutting through our conversation. The ship shook violently, throwing us both off balance. "What was that?" I shouted, grabbing the edge of the console. "Cloaked vessels," Holt shouted back, his fingers dancing over the controls. "They're firing on us." I rushed to my station, inputting commands to assess the damage. Activate shields. We need to protect the ship. The ship trembled under the onslaught, but our shields flared to life, absorbing the impact of the Krell weapons. I glanced at the displays, horror pooling in my stomach as I watched the damage reports come in. Return fire, I commanded, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We cannot let them take us down. The battle escalated outside as we exchanged fire with the Krell vessels. The bright beams of energy illuminated the dark void of space, the sound of explosions echoing through the ship's corridors. I focused on the fight, pushing aside the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. Jarnak, we're taking heavy damage, Holt shouted, his eyes wide with urgency. If we don't break through their lines, we won't make it to Gorth Roman 4. Then we need to draw their fire, I called back, formulating a risky plan. We'll use the colony's distress signal as bait. If we can lure them in, we can flank them. Holt hesitated for a moment, then nodded. It's risky, but we don't have a choice. I relayed the new orders, directing the crew to adjust our trajectory. As we charged forward, I could feel the tension coiling in my gut. This was it, our chance to make a stand. Suddenly, a massive Krell ship loomed in front of us, its dark silhouette eclipsing the stars. Brace for impact, I yelled, but it was too late. The ship shuddered violently as the Krell unleashed a barrage of fire. I fought to keep my balance, adrenaline flooding my system. We were losing precious time, and I could only hope that the Gorvax forces would arrive in time. Shields at 20%, Holt shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. We need to get out of here. Divert all power to the engines, I commanded, my mind racing. We have to reach that distress signal. The ship surged forward, but the Krell were relentless. As we navigated the chaos, I glanced back at Holt, determination igniting within me. We'll make it, Holt. We have to believe that. In the distance, I saw Gorth Roman 4, its surface ablaze with the remnants of the Krell's assault. My heart ached at the sight of destruction. This was our home, and we would protect it at all costs. Prepare to engage, I shouted as we drew closer. For Gorth Roman 4. The final push was overwhelming. The Krell ships swarmed around us, but we fought with everything we had. I felt the fury of my people coursing through me, fueled by the desire to protect our new allies. As we dove into the fray, I caught sight of the Gorvax fleet arriving, their ships cutting through the chaos like knives. Relief flooded through me. We weren't alone. Reinforcements, Holt yelled, a grin breaking through the tension. We can turn this around. Together, we launched a coordinated attack, our forces combining in a symphony of firepower. The Krell began to falter, their ranks thinning under our assault. I couldn't help but feel a rush of hope. But just as victory seemed within reach, the sky exploded with a blinding light. A massive Krell dreadnought had emerged from the shadows, its weapons charging for a devastating strike. Look out, Holt shouted, but I was already moving, my instincts kicking in. We need to take that ship down. With renewed determination, we pushed forward, our ships weaving through the chaos, heading straight for the dreadnought. I felt the weight of our allies beside us, and I knew that together we could do the impossible. As we approached the dreadnought, the gravity of our task settled in. I glanced at Holt, his expression mirroring my resolve. We do this together, I said firmly. Together, he agreed, his voice steady. With a deep breath, we dove into the heart of the enemy fleet, our ships coordinating seamlessly. The massive vessel loomed before us, its dark hull glinting ominously. We unleashed everything we had, cannons firing, torpedoes launched. The dreadnought shuddered under our combined assault, but it was still standing strong. Jarnak, we need to hit its core, Holt shouted, urgency thick in his tone. Then let's give it everything we've got, I replied, adrenaline pumping through my veins as I rallied the crew. We made our final charge, pushing through the wreckage and chaos, focused solely on the heart of the Krell ship. As we drew closer, a beam of energy shot past us, grazing our hull. Steady, I yelled, forcing my hands to remain steady on the controls. Aim for the core. With a final burst of energy, we unleashed our remaining weapons, a volley of fire that illuminated the darkness. The dreadnought trembled violently, and with a deafening explosion, it shattered, sending debris flying through space. Cheers erupted around me, a wave of relief and triumph surging through the ship. I felt Holt's hand clap against my shoulder, the bond between us solidified in that moment of victory. "We did it!" he exclaimed, eyes sparkling with excitement. "We really did it." But my joy was short-lived. As I surveyed the battlefield, the reality of our situation hit me. We had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The Krell were relentless, and they wouldn't rest until they reclaimed their power. "We have to prepare for what's next," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. "This is only the beginning." In the aftermath of the battle, as we regrouped and tended to the wounded, I felt the weight of my responsibilities bearing down on me. We had won a significant victory, but the threat of the Krell loomed larger than ever. Holt and I convened with the other leaders of our alliance, a sense of urgency threading through our discussions. "We need to fortify our defenses," I urged, my voice firm. "If they return with greater numbers, we must be ready." The leaders nodded, but there were whispers of dissent. "Can we trust all of our allies?" one of the Gorvax leaders questioned, skepticism lining his features. "Trust must be earned, but our focus now should be on survival," Holt interjected, his gaze fierce. "We need to come together, or we risk losing everything we fought for." As the discussions continued, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty. Our coalition had survived this far. We could face whatever came next. But as I glanced at Holt, I knew we had to work harder than ever to bridge the gaps between our peoples. Days turned into weeks as we prepared for the inevitable Krell retaliation. The atmosphere was charged, a mixture of anxiety and determination as we reinforced our defenses and trained for the battles ahead. I spent my time balancing diplomatic talks with tactical preparations, every moment feeling like a tightrope walk between trust and suspicion. The remnants of the Krell threat loomed over us like a storm cloud, and I knew we had to stay vigilant. "Jarnak," Holt said one evening as we reviewed our battle strategies, "how do you feel about our alliance now? Do you think we can truly hold it together?" I considered his question, reflecting on the challenges we faced. "I believe in our cause," I replied, my voice steady. "But we must confront our differences head-on. It is the only way to move forward." He nodded, a determined expression on his face. "Then let's make sure our next steps reflect that belief." With every passing day, I felt the urgency of our situation increasing. The Krell had yet to make their next move, but we knew they were out there, plotting and preparing. In a last-ditch effort to solidify our alliance, we organized a summit, inviting leaders from various species to discuss strategies and build trust. The atmosphere was tense, but the potential for unity sparked hope. As I stepped into the grand hall, I was struck by the diversity of those gathered. Humans, Gorvax, and representatives from other species filled the room, each bringing their unique perspectives and histories. "We stand at a precipice," I began, my voice steady. "The Krell threaten not just our existence, but our very way of life. Together, we have a chance to confront them, but only if we are united." The discussions were intense, filled with differing opinions and ideas. Some leaders pushed for immediate retaliation, while others advocated for a more cautious approach. The air crackled with tension, but I remained focused on our shared goal. As we hammered out our plans, I felt a growing sense of camaraderie among the representatives. There was an understanding that we were in this together, and with every decision made, we forged stronger bonds. But even as hope flourished, so did the shadows of doubt. An unknown faction within the coalition sought to undermine our efforts, spreading rumors and sowing discord. One night, I received an anonymous message warning of betrayal within our ranks. The fear settled deep within me. "Holt, we have a problem," I said, urgency in my tone as I showed him the message. His brow furrowed as he read it. "We need to investigate this. If there's a traitor among us, it could jeopardize everything. Together, we began digging deeper, uncovering layers of manipulation that threatened our fragile alliance. I couldn't shake the feeling that the Krell were not the only enemies we faced. As we worked to uncover the truth, the tension within our coalition reached a boiling point. Accusations flew, and mistrust festered among the leaders. One afternoon, I stood before a group of Gorvax leaders, trying to mediate a heated discussion. "We cannot let our differences tear us apart," I implored. "If we allow suspicion to rule us, we will lose everything." But the whispers of betrayal hung in the air like a thick fog, clouding judgment and shattering unity. I felt the weight of my failure pressing down on me. My vision of a united front was slipping through my fingers. In the midst of the turmoil, a shocking revelation came to light. The traitor was one of our own, an influential Gorvax leader who had been conspiring with the Krell all along. "Why would you do this?" I demanded, confronting the traitor in front of the council. "You jeopardized the lives of our people." A twisted smile crossed their lips. "This is bigger than you can imagine, Jarnak. The Krell will return, and when they do, they will reward those who stood by them." I felt rage boiling within me, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the greater threat. "We will stop you, and we will unite against the Krell." With the traitor exposed, we rallied together, reaffirming our commitment to our cause. This betrayal had tested us, but it also ignited a fire within our coalition, a determination to fight back against both the Krell and those who sought to divide us. With the traitor apprehended, we focused on rebuilding trust among our coalition. We held a summit to address the crisis, laying bare the shadows that had threatened to consume us. "Now is the time for transparency," I said, addressing the gathered leaders. "We cannot afford to let fear dictate our actions. We must stand united against the Krell." The atmosphere shifted, and slowly, but surely, the leaders began to share their thoughts and concerns openly. As we forged new agreements and reaffirmed our alliances, a renewed sense of purpose began to take hold. As the summit concluded, I felt a surge of hope. We had faced betrayal and survived. Now, we were stronger than ever. But even as unity blossomed, I knew the Krell would not sit idly by. Our renewed strength would provoke them, and I prepared for the storm ahead. Days turned into weeks, and we fortified our defenses, readying ourselves for the inevitable confrontation. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, but beneath the surface, a palpable tension remained. Then, just as we finished preparations, we received word of a Krell fleet heading toward our location, an armada unlike anything we had ever seen. "Holt, this is it," I said, steeling myself for the fight. "We need to be ready." He nodded, his determination shining through. "Let's show them what we've built together." As we prepared for battle, I felt the weight of leadership settling upon me. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of our alliance. The day of the battle dawned, and the skies darkened with the shadow of the approaching Krell fleet. We stood shoulder to shoulder with our allies, a united front against the threat. "Remember why we fight," I urged as we gathered for one final briefing. "This is for our homes, our families, and our way of life. We will not back down." The battle commenced with a deafening roar as the Krell ships descended upon us. Chaos erupted as we engaged in a fight for our lives, every ship working in unison to counter the overwhelming might of the Krell. The battle raged on, and I felt the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I fought alongside Holt, navigating the chaos with a renewed sense of purpose. "We need to target their command ship," Holt shouted, his voice rising above the din of battle. "If we take it down, we can disrupt their coordination." I nodded, adrenaline surging through me as we pushed deeper into the fray. "Let's move." With a fierce determination, we pushed toward the heart of the Krell fleet, dodging enemy fire as we navigated the chaos. The command ship loomed before us, a dark fortress of destruction. "We're almost there," Holt shouted, exhilaration in his voice. "Let's finish this." As we launched our final assault, the world around us blurred, the sound of battle fading into the background. All that mattered was our goal, the command ship that held the key to victory. As we closed in on the command ship, a sudden surge of energy erupted from its core, blinding us with a brilliant flash. I squinted against the light, realizing too late what was happening. "Brace for impact," Holt shouted, but it was too late. The shockwave hit us with an overwhelming force, sending our ship spiraling into darkness. I awoke to chaos, the ship listing dangerously as alarms blared around us. "Holt," I shouted, panic rising within me. "Are you all right?" "I'm here," he replied, struggling to regain control. "We've lost power. We're dead in the water." I fought against the disorientation, trying to piece together what had happened. The command ship had unleashed a devastating energy pulse, crippling our vessel. "Can you get us moving?" I asked, desperation threading my words. "I'm trying," Holt shouted, his fingers racing over the controls. "But we're taking heavy damage." Outside, the battle continued to rage, but we were powerless to join the fray. I felt a surge of frustration. We couldn't afford to be sidelined now. "Can you reroute power from the auxiliary systems?" I suggested, adrenaline fueling my determination. Holt nodded, his expression focused. "It's risky, but it might give us enough power to get back in the fight." With a deep breath, he began working the controls, and I gripped the console, waiting with bated breath as the ship shuddered around us. The tension in the air was palpable, every moment feeling like an eternity. Then, as if answering our prayers, the ship roared back to life. "We're moving," Holt exclaimed, relief flooding his voice. "Let's rejoin the battle," I shouted, determination surging within me. As we maneuvered back into the fray, the sights and sounds of battle washed over me. I could see our allies fighting bravely against the Krell, but the odds were still overwhelming. "We need to hit the command ship," I shouted, adrenaline coursing through me. "That's where we can turn the tide." "Agreed," Holt replied, his focus unwavering as he piloted the ship toward the chaos. We wove through enemy fire, narrowly avoiding destruction as we closed in on our target. With a final burst of speed, we charged toward the command ship, unleashing everything we had left. The explosion rocked our vessel, and I felt a surge of hope as I watched the Krell forces falter. But just as victory seemed within reach, the command ship retaliated, unleashing a barrage of energy that tore through our defenses. "Jarnak, we need to pull back," Holt shouted, panic lacing his voice. "No," I cried, determination igniting within me. "We have to finish this." With a fierce resolve, we pressed on, our hearts pounding as we charged into the fray. This was our moment, the culmination of everything we had fought for. The final clash was a whirlwind of chaos. The Krell command ship exploded, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. As the smoke cleared, I felt the weight of victory settling over us. Cheers erupted around us, the exhilaration of triumph coursing through my veins. We had done it. We had faced the Krell and emerged victorious. But as I looked around at the destruction, I also felt the weight of loss. We had fought hard, but the cost had been high. I could see the faces of those we had lost, and my heart ached for them. "Jarnak," Holt said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We did it. We united against a common enemy." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady despite the pain in my heart. "But we must remember those we lost and honor their sacrifices. This victory is not just ours, it belongs to all of us." In the aftermath of the battle, we gathered together, a coalition forged in the fires of conflict. As we honored the fallen, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. "We've faced darkness together," I said, addressing the gathered leaders. "But we have also forged a bond that can withstand any threat. This alliance is our strength, and together, we will build a brighter future." The leaders nodded, their expressions filled with resolve. We had weathered the storm, and now we stood united against whatever challenges lay ahead. With our newfound unity, we set to work rebuilding our worlds, forging stronger ties and preparing for the future. The shadows of war lingered, but we were no longer alone. We were a coalition bound by shared purpose. As the days turned to weeks, I felt the tides of change wash over us. The galaxy had witnessed our struggle, and the Krell would think twice before challenging us again. Holt and I continued to strengthen our alliance, forging new paths for collaboration. Our cultures began to intertwine, blending our strengths and learning from each other. But beneath the surface, I knew that the echoes of our battle would linger. We had emerged victorious, but the scars of conflict remained. We had to remain vigilant, knowing that threats could arise from unexpected places. One evening, as I gazed at the stars from the observation deck of the Endeavour, I felt a sense of hope rising within me. We had faced our fears and emerged stronger, united in purpose. The universe was vast, and our journey was far from over. But as I looked around at my allies Holt by my side, the Gorvax leaders rallying together, I knew we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, we would forge a new destiny among the stars, one built on trust, understanding, and the belief that even in the darkest of times, we could find the light within each other.